very basic situation we've got going on here. Now, you would have to repeat these steps for every single screen that you build, right? And you can imagine that you might get the height wrong, you might get the color wrong, and then I put my company name, but you're actually going to put a real company name in here, and this might change. You might want the header name to be changed. You might want the color to be changed, which means for every single instance, you would have to update this, and this can be very time consuming. So what Canvas Apps does has this components tab here and create a header in here. What we can do is just kind of stick in. Do this, we're going to make this bit of color. It's a very basic header component.
They create it in components, not screens.
That's right. So let's do this. So now what I can do is under custom, got my component header that I've created. So I can stick this in here, size that. But that means, and I could make multiple copies of this. That's not a problem. It does mean now that if I do decide to update my color scheme, pick green this time, and update all the instances used, right? So very, very useful tool. But there's more. So currently, this is just kind of a UI, but say we want this to actually do something. Let's just say we want to add a little home icon here, and we want to add some image. We're going to add a company logo. Now, if we come back to our screens, we can see that it's been updated, but it's one of the quotes. There because of this. So you can see just making the change in one place updates it everywhere else. Now we want this home button to actually do something, to have some action, right? We don't just want pretty eye candy. What we need to do is add a custom property to our component. So a property allows input and output from the component. So we're going to call this the home screen. And it's going to be an input of type screen. And we're going to add an action to this home button that says to. Now what this is going to do, a new property has appeared on the right-hand side, which is the home screen. Need to give it a home screen. So I've already created a home screen previously. Now, if I were to run this, take me to the home screen. This is how you can add behavior to your components. Say, for example, this behavior is fixed, right? This behavior is always going to navigate. Say we want a different behavior, maybe for a different screen or a different instance of this. We don't always want this home button to navigate. Maybe we want it to pop up with a notification saying you're on the home screen. So essentially, we don't want code to run in the component. We want the code to run in the instance of the component. So how do we do that? A specific property in here. So instead of a type for data is an event property type. I create an event property type, and let's just call this select. And add a button. So this button is going to call our new property just created. Clicking this button, trigger the onSelect property that we've just created for this component. So now if I go to my screens, see from up here, I now have an onSelect is available for me to use, and I can type in whatever code I want in here. It's as if this were a normal button that I'd add. For this one, I'm going to say notify hello world. And for this one, it's going to navigate me somewhere else. To scale. Maybe this one. So 3 very different behaviors. So this one now takes me to, this one notifies me with the hello world. One takes me to a different app, different screen, sorry. And this one launches a browser. So this is how we can have kind of complex behaviors going on with so far, all the component I've created is specific to the app. So again, if I see that I'm still within this app called responsive demo, and it's a screen, and now it's a component. So I've got my nice component that I can reuse everywhere in my app. But now I've got another developer who also wants to use the same component. So we have in Canvas apps, we have a component library. So in your main page, down here, there is a component library. So a component library is a collection of components that can be reused in other Canvas apps. You can import them, but they're all managed from the component library. What I'm going to do is I'll just open this existing component library I've created. Refresh the page just in case. It looks very similar to an app view, but this is a, you can actually import components from an existing app. Now you may ask, oh, why can't my friend developer just import the components from my responsive demo app that I've just created? The problem with that is it actually just creates a copy, which means if I were to update the original component, my friend wouldn't receive any updates, right? So again, you come back to the same problem where you have to make all the changes. So we don't want that. Save this.
Way of creating the rules or compliance within doing that.
What do you mean by that, sir?
In other words, I've created it here, component library, but somebody copies it over, but then puts it in the screen not as a component. Hence why when you do an update on the original because you just said it won't happen. So is there a compliance ruling, or is there AI can check, or?
There's no way for the AI to check, but you can set permissions so that they can't edit the original component.
Okay.
Right. And I'll demo what this looks like. So first of all, normally you wouldn't do this step. You would build your components straight in the component library.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Although I suppose it becomes a known fact. Hey guys, we only use the components here.
Yes.
Don't copy your own, please.
Yes.
And when you go to use the app, see, you didn't do it, did you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You can see it's copied our header that we've made, but it hasn't quite copied it correctly. But that's okay. Zero this. Zero this. Go back to my original app. This is what we call like a local component. It's only specific to this app. But now that I've moved it into my component library, I actually don't need this anymore. So how do we add a component from a component library? So we have this little button up here, which says get more components. Just need to save this first. And so this is our component from our component library. Our component library is called the test library. So now it becomes available under library components. This is our. So now it's here, and now anyone can open up a new app, and they simply need to import from the component library, and that component is now usable to them. They can't make changes to this, but have to make changes to the component library. If you want to, there is a way where you can create a local copy of this just for your app. Like you go edit component and it will create a copy, but this copy is not linked to the original component library. That's a little bit about component libraries.
To your original demo though, where you want to change your behavior on your button.
Yes.
If you created a copy though, but you changed the background, for example,
yeah,
the blue instead of green,
yeah,
it won't change.
If you created a copy, it wouldn't change.
Yeah.
If I updated my component library now, even though I'm not in the component library, I'm in my app, it will ask for an update to the app and it will bring in the new copy from the component library.
But would that be the whole thing, or?
That would be
like,
the whole thing.
For example, you want to create two different behaviors on that button on two different pages within your app.
Yep.
That's still updated.
So it depends what you're talking about here. So I've got my button.
Yeah.
Remember, I've defined the behavior of the button under the on select here, right? Which means this is local.
Sorry,
specific to that instance. Yeah.
Understand.
Yeah. Sorry, did you have a question?
Like you said, if we are making changes here, is it going to reflect to the library, or we specifically has to save? So if we are saving in our libraries or components, is it going to reflect everywhere, right?
Yes.
Because everybody is using that.
Yes.
So what is the way if we don't want to reflect and just keep the changes in our app, just to save it locally?
You can, yeah, and you go edit.
Create a copy and.
Right. We'll say if you want to edit this component, you can create a local copy. So if I create a local copy, it will come back into here.
Yeah.
I can make my changes here. And then I would have to import this component, or I would have to use this component under the custom, which is this one here.
Got it. So copy will work.
Yeah. So this copy is my local copy, but this one up here is from the component library.
Okay.
So this one would receive updates from the component library, whereas this one wouldn't. So I'll just show you some of the components that we're currently using here. didn't build any, but I think they look nice. So we have like an alert. For example, if there's no data available, we show this alert and have a notification. It looks like we've got 7 buttons here, but these are actually all the same component. And what we've done is just change the input here that changes the styling. So we've got 7 different styles of buttons. So if I just change this, that button changes. So the only difference between these buttons is what value is up here. So now we've got a kind of a UI library that we can use to make all our apps more consistent across the look and feel. You can do more fancy things. This one's a picture, and this one has 3 buttons, but actually these are also the same component. So if I use to show text or not, I can show an input, buttons, I can choose to show the image. So this one's got 3 buttons, and similar to what I showed you earlier with the buttons doing the on select, button has an select, which I can define the behavior of this button local to the instance, right? I can do whatever I want with this button. It's not predefined. It just, yeah, it gives us a lot of flexibility. And you can imagine it's a lot quicker to do this rather than to have to build the container and the labels and add the buttons each time. And then styling as well. Sure.
If this is centralized, then, for example, if you change at one point, you have to do a regression testing for all the 20 apps
Yes.
wherever it is used.
Yeah, if we make a change to a component, so I'll actually make a change so that you can see what happens. My test library, here's my component. Just going to shift this button this way a little. It doesn't update automatically. So if I refresh this page right now, and this is one of the limitations of components. So I'm refreshing my Canvas app. See here, it says component library updates available, so I can click repeat. And it tells me what component library that I'm using has updates to it.
See what is the update.
No, you can't see what is the update. If I click update here, screen that I built, see that this component received the update, whereas this local one that I'd created didn't receive the update. Look, this is a kind of a skeleton app that we use now for this big project. And it's basically all components, right? We've got our header component up here. We've got our filter component down here. When we click this, we've got our own inbuilt menu that pops up with apps. We've done this because sometimes going to the main Power App menu is a little bit tricky. You've got a whole bunch of custom apps there, whereas we want our users to just use the apps available to them and related to this manufacturing project. So that's why we've done this. But this is a component. Our header is a component. We've got this filter as well, which is a component. So we can chuck this together pretty quickly. And if you had to this out individually for each screen, a long time. There are limitations to components. So you can't have components within components. You can't have subcomponents. So imagine if we use that button as an example, we couldn't then use that button inside another component. just doesn't allow that. We can't use components inside galleries. So if you want to have a repeating set of components, unfortunately, you can't do that. Components themselves can't connect directly to a data source, right? So you have to create an input to the component, which is like a table. And then from your app, you would feed that table into the component. And finally, as gentleman alluded to, if you update a component in a component library, it asks you to update the whole thing. It can be very frustrating. So what we've done is separated kind of each major component into its individual component library. Otherwise, you'll forever updating stuff. Yeah, are there any questions so far on components?
Yeah. Just I'm assuming that these component libraries are within one environment.
Mhm.
So if you had like multiple programs of work across the organization,
Yeah.
if you wanted them to all be using the same components,
Yeah.
to copy and paste them right into the different environments.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be like a central point that they could point to.
You could use something like DevOps, or you could use the pipelines to make sure you've got one repository, which would then feed the others out. And you can do that with inside an unmanaged solution. You've got your main component library, and then you would deploy to the other environments.
Just a simple question, like let's suppose we are updating our component library and we have made a small change. Do we have to go to all the manually, you have to go to all the apps and manually tick an update? We can just publish, there is no publish button.
No, you would have to go to each app. I think the reason for this is sometimes you might break something. Maybe you don't want to update your app because it might be a breaking bug, for example. So you might just want to not update your app at all. So
If we don't update, it's gonna stay in the older version
yes.
and that's not gonna cause any problem in the stuff.
No.
Thank you.
A little bit about this topic too, which I quite enjoy. It's responsive design. So in today's society, you don't know what size device people are using. I've got my phone, I've got my laptop. My laptop has a 16:9 ratio. You might have a tablet, which is a 3:2 ratio. At home, I've got a 34-inch wide, ultra wide screen. And so that's a different ratio altogether. So responsive design means that you can build one app that would fit any screen. So it's a quicker development time in the sense that you don't need to create a separate screen. I've seen apps where you've got one screen for the desktop and one screen for the mobile, right? So you're basically just copying, 80% of it's the same and you're just copying it. You just have one screen, it's easier to maintain. But the flip side of that is it can get complicated quickly if you don't know what you're doing and then deal with stuff and things break. So Power Apps gives us basically two tools for creating responsive design apps. We've got a vertical container, which aligns all its children vertically, and a horizontal container, which aligns everything horizontally. And combining these two containers, you can basically come up with a very responsive design. So let me show you what that looks like. So here, this could be a form or something. You've got your question at the top and you've got your answer input on the bottom, right? And this works because of my current screen. If I were to, let's start with this. So this is in a horizontal container. So I want this this part here at the very end all the time, right? This could be a toggle for active or inactive, something like that. I want this here to be at the end. So as I shrink my screen, I want it to stay at the end. And as I expand my screen, I also want it to stay at the end, right? So what I've got inside here is I have a little rectangle, which is a spacer, and this has a flexible width. It's on, so it'll fill up all the space. Now let's just say if I get really small, actually it's not going to cut, right? Smaller and smaller, I've lost it, right? So you can do some really fancy stuff with this. So rebuilt this. If I turn that toggle on, I can get a lot smaller now and everything displayed. And these are all, I haven't changed anything. I haven't added new components. It's all just the same components, but it's just how you set it out. So these are these are vertical components, but when I toggle this, it's become a horizontal component, right? So this is just
Helps.
instead of building a separate, for example, you're going to input this data into your database, you would have to create like a patch function. If you built 2 copies of this, you would have 2 patch functions going. And then if you wanted to add an extra question in, now you've got to make the changes in 2 places. It just gets more complicated. But with this way, now you can just build in one place and it's good.
In a general sense, so on a phone, you have a landscape.
Yep.
Goes across.
Yeah.
You go the other way, it automatically
Yes.
goes. So why have a button?
That's for the demo purposes.
Oh, sorry.
But yes, you're right, exactly. I will get to that. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll get to that, yeah.
My usual.
So this skeleton app is built responsively. So you can see that the header expands, and this main kind of content container will expand to fill the space. And just to compare that against our original that we built here, this wasn't built responsively, so it doesn't matter how big I make the screen, that's always going to stay the same. So building your Canvas apps responsively from the beginning kind of makes things easier down the line. Wanted to see what that looks like, you would just have to chuck in a that looks ugly, but just to give you an idea. So because this is they're now going to respond to my screen. All I have to do is just make this. So now it's going to respond to the size of the screen and line up. Cool. And one last bit of the puzzle to help with this responsive design is, well, actually, I'll show you this one. It's kind of cool to see how this is built. It has a vertical container and it's got 2 components inside the vertical container. You've got your header up here and you've got another container over there. And this container has 2 components with inside, or 2 children. It's got your header and it's got this kind of content container. But you can see that you're able to set the margins as well, which looks nice. If I go back to my app, I set the margin for this container to be 20 all around. And it just gives it a nice kind of feel. If you were to do this manually, you're needing some formulas and it just gets messy. Whereas this is all dynamic done for you. Are there any questions related to this kind of responsive design? Yeah.
When you changed the approach to use components, did your apps get faster, and why?
Our apps get faster.
Yes.
Didn't notice there wasn't a noticeable improvement in the performance of the app. It was definitely it's definitely faster in terms of like less bugs coming through. Yeah, because we didn't have to keep reworking. Again, we were working with, you're developing on your screen, which is a certain size, but your client might have a different size screen, right? So, and they might complain saying, oh, well, this is not working anymore. This is cut off. It's not displaying properly. So having a kind of responsive build things up.
That almost the same thing.
Mhm.
Is there a way, I messed up, is there a way like you've made the app from your components, it's
Yeah.
wonderful, but you want to keep that solid for a week? Somebody updates the components, the original components, but you don't want it updated.
Yeah.
How would you not update it?
So if someone updates the component library, when you open the app in edit mode, it'll ask you whether you want to update the components.
Now, like the app's being used,
Uh-huh.
on some apps, you may want to have them updated because it's the latest and greatest and you're actually just doing a test.
Yeah.
The other ones you don't want to be updated because they're being used at the moment.
So when you make a change to a component inside a component library, it doesn't push the change.
Thank you.
It just says the changes are available.
Okay.
Right. And so when you open an app, edit, it will ask you, do you want to update your components? So you can choose to not at that time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. And last topic I want to cover is formulas. So this is not a widely used feature in Canvas apps, but I think it's very, very useful. So formulas are snippets of code that can be reused in multiple places. Think of it as components, but for actual code itself. Okay? It's very useful for global things that won't change. Formulas are immutable, which means you can't change the formula once you've typed it in. Most app developers, I think, use the onStart and use, it's very common to stick a whole bunch of global variables in your onStart, and that's it. The problem with onStart, it's useful, but it's a global variable, which means something else in your app could change it, right? And then you've got to hunt down what made that change. Whereas a formula is immutable, it doesn't change at all. So you could set a formula to be like it's basically a constant. Once you've set it, it's not going to change. Formulas also, they only run as required, whereas an onStart runs at the start of your app and it runs once. It doesn't run ever again, right? Whereas formulas, every time you reference that formula, it'll run again. With onStart, you have to run everything in the onStart. You can't say, I only want to run this bit in the onStart, right? Whereas a formula, again, it runs just that one formula that you chose. So formulas, make things very helpful. So I'll show you what that looks like. So primarily, we use it for settings. So we've got colors. This color is the formula. So if I go into here, you can see it's a formula here. Formulas live in the app up here, and a whole bunch of formulas defined here, but they don't actually take up memory. They don't get instantiated because they're not variables. So we don't want people to come and change what this color means, right?
It's almost like having a cascading solution.
Kind of. It's almost, yeah, it's as close as you're going to get right now. Yeah, so I can type this in and I could change formula here. Don't want one. So we use it for font sizes as well. And you can do fancy things like formulas can use other formulas. So for this, but we defined all our formulas for both a mobile and for a desktop. So here's our mobile. It's a desktop. What we've done is we've put them all into another formula that says, depending on your device size, use this font. So now instead of doing a whole if statement in here saying, oh, if your phone uses this size and if your phone uses this size, you just need to define one formula in here. A little bit, but the font size will dynamically change. Yeah. One other thing that we use this for, which I think is really cool, is we use this to determine the screen size. So this comes back to, I think, your question. We don't want to toggle to flip things, right? We want things to dynamically change based off the screen size. So we've chucked this into a formula. I mean, Power Apps does give you an active screen size, but we've named this to like phone landscape, tablet, and desktop to make things easier for us. It's like is we can but as I shrink this, the head is now changed. It's bigger again. So this is a component, but we're feeding the size of the screen. This component is dynamically changing. Our filter has also changed, so we can. Again, this filter was built using the responsive design, so you can see we're able to do this. It's just one filter component, but it has different configurations depending on the screen size.
Awesome.
Any repository to get the standards? It's common across all, right? Is there any repository where you can get the standards?
What do you mean by standards?
Standards is like now you have defined for mobile,
Yep.
desktop, app.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be pretty same for all the apps which I'm gonna build.
Yes. So what we're doing for this is we're using the inbuilt permission. So they've got screen size .small, size .medium, large, and extra large. And that these have their own breakpoints. You can look them up in the documentation, but you're also able to overwrite them if you want.
Just adding to that, there is a standard media queries. That is a standard. So if you Google it like a media queries, got this standard, which is like that is what he is inheriting there.
We just created our own kind of formula because screen size .small doesn't necessarily mean that much. Here we've got phone. You can actually put more than just constants in here. You can put even a whole filter statement or patch function if you wanted into your formula, if you're going to reuse it. For example, you might have a, you might be querying a table But you might have the same query in multiple places. That would be a good candidate to put it into a formula. You could, yeah, you would only have to make the change in one place.
I mean, so what is the real world use case like? Is it targeting, you are targeting the frontline workers? Purpose of building the responsive based canvas design? Is it like who are all your target audience?
For the formulas.
No, the app itself, like
So the project we're doing now is for manufacturing. So it's for the plant operators inside manufacturing.
Just to the formulas, going back to his question. When you're in a field service, you show 3 labels, option sets.
Yeah.
Right. Some people with it's not easy to go and tap those values.
Yeah.
Are you using formulas now to actually make the input option, select the input option wider?
Yes.
Easily. Okay.
So not for this, but you could. I'll show you.
The reason is we in the past in 2018, like when they launched these kind of apps,
Yeah.
huge complaint from field service teams,
Yeah.
frontline workers, what he just pointed out.
Yeah.
They complained saying we cannot tap this,
Yeah.
we cannot tap that because like it's for me it's okay for you to select. For people with big fingers, it's very hard to tap.
Yeah.
So it's really good to see that formulas
Yeah.
can actually redirect the
For example, this filter component we've got here. See, we've got being in our formula as an input. So the behavior is changing. And that's why we've got different font sizes as well. Sometimes on a desktop or a phone, the font sizes don't quite look the same. If you want to save space or you want to make your control bigger, yeah. But yeah, that's what formulas are used for. I'm kind of out of time, so
Could I ask, could you go back?
sure.
You go back one slide,
From here.
before that one. You had a number 18.
This is a good example here. This formula. Sometimes it's useful to know if the person is using the Windows player or they're using the browser because the behavior can be quite different. So we've just put that into a formula which
Oh, yeah.
we could stick somewhere else into our app. That we need to troubleshoot something. But yeah, are there any questions? Sorry, I'm a bit short on time.
how big is your team?
So for the project, we've got 4.5 developers.
The reason is like the amount of effort you guys are investing to make this completely responsive.
Yeah.
There should be like a value out of it. Like
Yeah, so there's levels of responsiveness. There's responsiveness, which is like mobile and desktop. And there's responsiveness, which is kind of tablet, desktop.